Atheist Nomads, episode 381. How long until evangelicals turn on Trump?
The podcast you're about to listen to includes cursing and talking about hoo-haws. Please be advised.
Welcome to another episode of Atheist Nomads. I am Dustin, and here in a bit, Lauren will be joining me for the news. But I'm going to be taking care of the opening and dusting off the degree and feedback by myself. So hang in there with me until she can join us. Yeah, if you're wondering why, it's because she'll actually be joining tomorrow in recording time. But for listeners, it'll just be in a few minutes. So, yeah. Anyway, I've got some opening thoughts. COVID is just... Man, this new wave is really bad, and just in time for the holidays. Like, looking at the local numbers, they are just skyrocketing. Like, I get daily updates because I work for a hospital. I get daily update emails on, how many patients are in the different hospitals in the health system that have COVID, and how many are in critical care, how many patients under investigation, and what's the current active case rate in each of the counties where we have a hospital. And it has been really interesting watching that. They kind of started that last bit during the last wave, the one back in July and August. And it was always interesting watching as the county numbers started rising, and then the hospitalizations were a week or two behind on that. And then when the county active case rate started dropping, hospitalizations started going down again in about 2 weeks later. So, that one, I think we peaked out at like 750 cases per 100,000 people in Ada County. That's the county that Boise's in, with a population of, I believe the county is up at around 450,000 at this point, but 750 per 100,000. So that's still less than 1% of the population with an active case. Now, granted, to be counted as an active case would require getting tested and testing positive, or being a known household member of somebody who has tested positive who has symptoms. So when you have that 750 number, in all practicality, it's probably a lot closer to 1,500, maybe even 2,000. With people who just don't bother getting tested, or people who are asymptomatic not getting tested, because when you've got those kind of numbers, good luck getting tested if you're not symptomatic. So we're now in this new wave, have finally reached, and watching the numbers in Idaho, Idaho has been climbing a lot, well into record territory. A lot of that has been outside of the Boise area. The Twin Falls area got hit really hard. Eastern Idaho got hit really hard. Northern Idaho got hit really hard. And now the Treasure Valley is getting hit really hard. And this is similar to what's going on in the rest of the country, where it's the more rural areas that are getting hit the hardest by this current wave. And, we're now reaching, I think we're past 840 cases per 100,000 that are either confirmed positive or assumed to be positive without getting tested. That number, that's still going up, and the hospitalizations are following. And some of the news stories about what's been going on in Twin Falls, that's a relatively small town, smallish city. It has been talked about on the podcast before. The main source of income there is dairies. Like, that's where the main Ore-Ida potatoes have always been. So, your tater tots, that's Twin Falls, Idaho. Your Chobani yogurts, most of that comes from Twin Falls, Idaho. And that's a place that has, they've been having to divert all pediatric patients who would require hospitalization at the only hospital they have there to Boise. That's a 2-hour drive. They've been having to really shut down as much as they can there and divert as much as they can to Boise. There's been questions recently here locally as to, okay, what happens when we're full here? Where can we send to? And the answer is nowhere. Salt Lake is full. All their hospitals are past capacity. Portland hospitals are starting to fill up. Seattle's are starting to fill up. And in those cases, a lot of that is with transfers from outside areas. So where would we send people to? When you're the main regional hub, that's where the buck stops. And the hospitals here are filling up. Services are starting to be scaled back at the hospitals. And then we've got Thanksgiving coming up. And we all need to make sure we carefully think through what our plans are. There is certain amounts of reasonable risk, but when the numbers are getting this high in almost every part of the US, don't do big family Thanksgiving. Try not to travel for Thanksgiving. This is getting really bad. And if it keeps getting worse, it's going to be getting way worse. All right, well, there's the first thought. My second opening thought is the Schisms podcast is still on indefinite hiatus. Basically, it's dead. I have had various side projects over the years. There was doing some YouTube videos on doing audio production in Linux. That basically stopped when Kylie was born. We had the Sci-Fi Nomads podcast, which stopped when Kylie was born. And I tried to get Schisms started, and I got 4 or 5 episodes in, and I just couldn't keep up with it. It's one of those things where the amount of work required to do that well was something I couldn't keep doing while having a family and a job and the additional stresses of working from home and Lauren's health issues and trying to work on the trailer so we could get some kind of travel. And I don't see that time coming back. I need smaller projects that I can easily finish that don't require a lot of brain power all the time and don't require constant ongoing commitment. When I do have the time for that, I need to be reinvesting that back into this podcast. This is the one that's been going on for 8.5 years. It makes us money. It's stable and going well. And I owe it to the listeners to put the time in that I can to try to make this show better. And one of the things that does help is I've been doing it for 8.5 years. So it is one of those things that I can kind of half-ass for a while, and it's not going to really screw things up because I've done it long enough that it doesn't require as much work. So for a while at least, I will definitely just be a one podcaster. I am hoping that we will be able to, again, before too long, do another live stream. We're still tweaking the setup here in our living room, and it's getting really good. So the next live stream, I think, should be pretty good. There was a couple issues with the last one, and then there was the one that we had to cancel most recently. So I'll keep working on all that, and we will be doing more of these. And interestingly enough, the podcast is automatically uploaded to YouTube every week. It's just a audio with a static image with the logo and episode number and title. And not a whole lot of people consume the podcast that way, but there are a handful, and it's something that works automatically. Well, it's been getting a lot more spam, and earlier this week, someone reported 3 separate episodes that are almost 2 years old. These were episodes 307, 308, and 309. They reported them for not being appropriate for all ages. I have, and of course now they're age restricted. And what's interesting is you can do age restricted on individual uploads, but there isn't a way to do channel wide age restricted. There is the setting for, is it intended for children or not? This is a podcast that is definitely not intended for children. That being said, it's also one that I don't think should be specifically age restricted. There are teenagers who are atheists who need help. So if that is you, please use an actual podcast app or even Spotify. That'll work better so that you can keep getting the episodes. Well, now it's time for dusting off the degree. And this was an idea that started off as it was just going to be a quick little joke, but no, this definitely needs to be expounded upon more. So I'm sure everybody listening has heard at some point the evangelical Christian trope that, of course, atheists are evil. Just look at Stalin, Hitler, and Pol Pot. And if they hadn't been atheists, they wouldn't have been that bad. Like, they wouldn't have turned into crazy, horrible mass murderers. And what's kind of crazy with that one is okay, Stalin and Pol Pot, those were both purveyors of kind of Leninist Marxism with officially atheistic states, similar to how China is officially an atheistic state. And, atheistic states versus secular states is actually a big difference. Secular states, like at least until recently, the U.S., have officially no opinion or involvement or assistance or persecution or stopping or helping of religion. Whereas an official atheistic state, the policy is to try to destroy religion, or at least repress it enough to discourage people from being a part of it. And so far, the only atheistic states have actually been communist states. And so Stalin and Pol Pot on that list are, saying, oh, that's because they were atheists. Well, no, they were mass murderers because they were following a form of communism that requires, that really suggests that you murder all the dissidents, which has nothing to do with the fact that they're atheists. And Hitler on that list is also an interesting one because he's included because obviously a Christian couldn't have been a Nazi. When Hitler was a Christian, he was Roman Catholic. He probably wasn't very devout, but that's true of most Catholics. And most people wouldn't call a Catholic who isn't very devout an atheist. Hitler wasn't excommunicated by the Catholic Church. He enjoyed the support of the Pope and the bishops in Germany. He had wide support from Protestant leaders as well throughout most of Germany. And, he very much was running a majority Christian state, based a lot of his teachings and ideals and policies on the writings of Martin Luther, the founder of the Protestant Reformation. And the basis for the slaughter of Jews was the idea that they killed Jesus. And so it was all very Christian in what was being done. Now, not Christian in the sense of, oh, well, that's a very Christian thing to do, which is a really meaningless term. It was based on Christian ideas and supported by Christians. Well, right now, Donald Trump is supported by evangelical Christians and recently officially changed his religious affiliation, or at least identification, from Presbyterian to non-denominational. Now, non-denominational just means vague evangelical, or more commonly, the member of a particular evangelical church. And his Presbyterian affiliation was really just left over from his birth and early childhood, which really makes sense considering his mom was Scottish. But I can't help but wonder, how long is it going to be until evangelicals abandon Trump, begin condemning Trump for many of the horrible things that he has done, from his complete mishandling of the pandemic response to children in cages, the brutal over-response to mass protests, and his general lack of decency, ethics of any kind. Like, if evangelicals doubled down on Trump for a long time, like well after he's out of office and well after he eventually dies, that would be pretty surprising. Now, if I were to really put my guess on it, it would be that within 6 months of him leaving office, a decent number of evangelicals will abandon him. By the time he dies, most will have abandoned him. For the most part, they'll have just started ignoring and forgotten him. And it'll be the next generation that will genuinely condemn him. And I wonder how long, because most people, it is a pretty common assumption, and has been for quite a while, that Donald Trump is probably an atheist. And it's a much more justifiable and easily supported idea than, say, Hitler calling Hitler an atheist. And so I wonder how long it's going to be until not only are evangelicals condemning Trump, but they're lumping him in with Stalin, Hitler, and Pol Pot as the examples of how dangerous atheism is. All right, and we have Lauren joining us for news.
Hello.
So for our first story, Catherine Stewart does a column in the New York Times, and she talked about some religious extremism stuff going on right now with Christian nationalists are not deterred by Donald Trump's defeat.
Well, darn.
Yeah. So from what she's been seeing in all of this, they do see it as a victory in part because Trump got more than 70 million votes.
Yeah, I'm still upset about that.
He literally got the second most votes of anybody ever running for president.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
They both set records for most votes.
Ugh.
Yeah. So, yeah, sure, Biden beat him by more than 5 million votes nationwide, plus a whole bunch of electoral votes, but still, that was an impressive move to get out their base, which keeps shrinking.
Well, yeah. And I also think it's the general mentality of those voters are, something's coming after me.
Mm-hmm. Biden
doesn't soothe any of those fears. Trump does. He's constantly promising to get the bad guys. And that's hard to sway.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that she wrote in her article was about, quote, the 2020 election is proof that religious authoritarianism is here to stay, and the early signs now indicate that the movement seems determined to reinterpret the defeat at the top of the ticket as evidence of persecution and its own righteousness. With or without Trump, they will remain committed to the illiberal politics that the president so ably embodied. Ooh, boy.
Yeah, so the only way that I can think of is try to convince conservatives that Trump's way of life is a bad thing that's going to come after them.
This is one of those weird ones because like the modern form of conservatism, which is getting so extreme that most people who consider themselves conservative shouldn't really be.
They're moderate now.
Yeah, shouldn't really be identifying with it because it's like it's basically slash and burn.
Yeah.
It's, we got a whole bunch of votes, but we lost, so that's a victory, and it's all fraud. And like, Trump won in 2016 and claimed fraud.
Right.
Lost and claimed fraud.
Yeah.
Right, he's just been talking about fraud, electoral fraud, the whole time. And you look at what happens when...
Strengthening the idea that the voters are the problem.
Yeah. And you look at what's been happening with, since Reagan was president, every time Republicans are in power, they cut taxes and raise the deficit. And then Democrats get into power and the Republicans are all just screaming about cut the deficit.
Yeah. It's a great bait and switch.
Yeah. If you create the deficit, you can't claim the next people in have to fix that.
Yes, you can. Because they do.
Yeah. That would be basically that is the I wonder if one of them was like, that seems to work for 3-year-olds.
Yeah, we're familiar with that.
But yeah, with the whole Christian nationalism thing, like with the recent way that Mitch McConnell's been really fucking up the court system and got like a full quarter or third of all court positions, including a full third of the Supreme Court filled with Trump appointees that are all signed off on by the Heritage Foundation and super right-wing entities where they're young ideologues, not experienced, well-tested, well-reasoned, and well-respected jurists, which was how that used to all be done. Now it's, you're a young ideologue. Cool, let's put you on a court.
Welcome to the new life. I mean, it's just another thing that's changed.
The norms are all gone. And
I honestly think that we've been riding high on the satanic Church of Satan, taking a lot of people to court. The problem there is that it was going well, and then it completely backfired. And we're living in that backfire now, where they said, you can't have this Christian monument here, and now Christians feel persecuted.
Yeah.
Strengthened their persecution ideal. And the only way I honestly think we're going to be able to get through to them is if we we have to convince Christians that separation of church and state is to their benefit.
That used to be...
We need to bring that back.
Yeah, that used to be what all Christians
thought. We can't
thought.
be going after Christian monuments or writing or even just saying God in a pledge. We've got to let that... I think we got to let that stuff go for now and build back up their trust in the idea that the government can come for you unless we build in these laws to separate it. We have to use fear to our advantage here. They don't listen to anything else.
But the unfortunate thing is that's not anything we could do. They will need other Christians to convince them that they need separation.
Right, but it takes people like you and I to change the direction of the conversation. By introducing the idea that, oh man, the government could really shut down these Christian bloody-blods if this law goes into effect or if these laws are taken down. Man, if separation of church and state were real, this wouldn't be a problem. That feels dirty, but...
It is dirty.
It is.
But it's something, we've talked to, recently here on the show, we've talked to the president of American Atheists, and the director of government relations with the Secular Coalition for America. Yeah, they have both completely changed focus. American Atheists has switched their focus from national to local because you can't make headway on the national stage right now. And the SCA is focused on... And
that will change too.
Yeah. And the Secular Coalition for America has changed their focus from fighting bad stuff in the courts to trying to minimize how bad the courts treat atheists.
Yeah, I think that's a good... We have to... we've lost ground and we have to build ourselves back up before we can start tackling some of the bigger issues again. Basically, we have to change everybody's perception of what separation of church and state is, how it can benefit non-Christians and Christians and Muslims and everybody else. That neutral, non-religious speech is a benefit for everybody because then they can't come for you. Dun, dun, dun.
Right, which growing up,
yeah,
that's what Adventists were saying it was.
Yeah.
But they've gotten pulled into the evangelical theocratic
because
blob.
Their enemy used to be Catholics and now it's something else.
And Catholics are starting to get pulled into that blob. We have a cancer in the country of modern, hyper-conservative, far-right, white supremacist evangelicalism that just keeps pulling in anybody who touches any of those.
Right. And like cancer, it's also a natural part of the system that in most cases is limited. But when something goes wrong, it goes terribly wrong really fast, and we need to treat it. And part of that is, in some cases, changing the entire system a little bit to be, I don't know. I've just been reading a lot about how modern right-wing conservative extremists are the way you can't reasonably talk to them on the way that you and I would talk to somebody. You've got to frame it from their perspective as they are being attacked by something and they have to protect themselves. And the best way to do that is secularism or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Because you can't wipe out religion. You can't wipe out Christianity.
No.
So you've got to mitigate it.
But you need to be able to have conversations that start with reality.
Yeah.
And if you
now everything's inflamed to the point where reality isn't the issue. It's perception. And we got to bring it back.
So step one, before we try to fix any of those things, we need to fix the perception of reality.
Right. You have to acknowledge that, okay, I understand that you perceive this as a threat and not tell them directly to their face that you're wrong. And it's because that will just turn them off.
No, what I mean is we need to get back to the point where facts aren't debatable, that facts are facts.
Right.
And
yeah, we have to kill the anti-science movement. The truth has always been debatable.
But basic facts of events and who did what documented, that needs to be something that is... Because right now you look at...
Heck, deny the Holocaust and you get imprisoned in Europe.
And I'm not saying going that far, but we're at the point where right-wing conservatives live in a completely different universe than everybody else because they're operating on a different set of facts because of having their own media. And as a combination of internet and Fox News and the like, that they get their own version of the events.
But that's always been around. I mean, tabloids.
Not to that extreme.
Tabloids. Rush Limbaugh's been around since what? Freaking 80s?
Around 1990.
And people have always listened to them. They've just never given them this much credence.
Rush Limbaugh in the 90s did not have, because I spent all summer every year as a kid listening to him while I played in my sandbox. He had a different take on what was right and wrong, but at least at that point, the assumption was the facts, the reasonably understood facts of the situation. The interpretation of that was different, but the facts themselves were the same.
So we're running into the statistician problem.
What is reality?
You have data. How can you... But depending on how you show it, it can be skewed to show two completely different truths. Unless you regulate the statistician, the middleman, aka the media, there's nothing you can do. And when you start regulating the media, people will start burning down buildings.
Right.
So there's... I don't know if there's...
We have a epistemological crisis in our world.
There's a Scrabble word for you.
And I would say when you have an epistemological crisis, it is a very serious existential crisis, because if people can't agree on how you know things, you can't have a conversation. Literally, communication is impossible if you cannot agree on what facts are. It is impossible to have a conversation with a diehard Trump supporter about Donald Trump because that person believes a completely different set of facts about Donald Trump than we do. There is no debate if you don't even have basic facts in agreement.
Right. And people have been trying to come up with ways to gently coax people back into reality. I say use their own perception against them to do it. But you can't.
That will always backfire.
You can't kill them with niceness.
But if you feed the crazy.
I'm not saying feed it. I'm just saying that you can tweak it so that if they want to feel like victims, make them feel like victims and show them that there is a way to protect themselves from what they fear that is aligned with reality and is good for the country, not anti-government, anti-reality bullshit. Give them an alternate set of tools to fix the problem versus telling them that they're wrong and making them double down.
But they are wrong. This is one of
This is the problem that every atheist has ever had talking to a religious person, and we still haven't figured it out. You can't just tell people they're wrong. That doesn't convince anybody.
Right, but when you are in the most powerful country that has had the most stable government, possibly in the least stable government for a large country in the history of the world.
200 years?
Stable democratic government.
Okay.
There have been stable monarchies for much, much longer, but stable democratic government for the longest period in history, the most powerful country in the world.
Was, anyway.
We still are the most powerful.
We're
still more powerful than China and Russia.
Well, we think we are. I don't know if they actually are. I really don't know anymore.
We could do serious damage to them. They couldn't attack us. They don't have those kinds of capabilities.
Just because we could shoot ourselves in the foot doesn't make us the most powerful.
With the number of ICBMs and aircraft carriers, yeah, we are the most powerful.
I guess.
The point though with that is that Americans don't need to fear anyone.
Yeah, except each other. Which is what this has turned into.
We shouldn't need.
We need someone to fear.
Each other.
We need to fear somebody. And if it's not Russia, if it's not China, if it's not the British monarchy, it's got to be somebody.
Because, yeah, if you look at history, it was the British. Then the South feared their slaves uprising or the North trying to take away their slaves. And there's always the fear of those savages out in the frontier. And by the time that was done, there was fear of the Mexicans, and there was fear of black people that they might actually want rights. There was the fear of women wanting rights.
So those of us who think that nationalism is petty and old-fashioned because we see the globe as one giant economic globe, that kind of mentality doesn't make sense. But then our status as a nation doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So at that point, you've now limited yourself to maybe 5% of the population that think national borders are bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And the 95% are still fighting amongst themselves, and you don't know why, and you don't know how to fix it.
Well, except
there's nothing you can do.
Except we do know part of why. The Russians have been meddling with the right to help.
That's a reason, yeah.
To help focus their fear and paranoia that should have been focused on the Russians.
Like I said, we need to fear somebody else. So let's start getting pissed off at the Russians again. Do we need another Cold War?
The Cold War never really ended. We just thought it did.
Yeah.
We've been stupidly thinking the Cold War ended.
I think the boomers were so exhausted from the Cold War that they were eager to have a sigh of relief for a little while in the 90s. And now it's just like, oh, by the way, guys, it's like racism. It didn't really go away. It's back and it's worse than before. And they're like, God damn it.
Yeah. Putin,
dang it, I'm a week from retirement. The Cold War is back.
Yeah, the Clinton administration was all buddy with Boris Yeltsin, who had his country being slowly taken over by Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, we were okay with them as long as they were weak.
And
then what happened? Oops.
They're not really strong, but that doesn't matter. They're big.
Yeah.
And they're getting stronger because they have oil.
Yeah. And that goes into a whole nother tirade.
So I guess the solution is a double Cold War? Both Russia and China?
Well, now we're getting into some James Bond shit right there. You know, quote unquote, the good old days. And that's how it is right now. If you look at major media, it's all economic, but it's basically China and Russia versus us.
Yeah.
And it keeps us as a nation somewhat cohesive, which I hate.
But if you look at some of the moves that are happening, China's in the process of making a new free trade agreement with South Korea, Japan, Thailand, the Philippines, American allies.
Right, those are our pawns. They can't have our pawns.
Those are our client states that China is pulling into their sphere. And China and Russia have also formed BRICS, a kind of anti-NATO, anti-G7 type thing that's China, Russia, Brazil, India, and South Africa. Those countries don't like each other, but they're starting to.
They hate us more. I know.
We live in a world where in all reality, the Cold War never ended. It's just fractured. And Americans have been really, really stupid about it.
That's because Americans don't know any better.
Yeah.
The people at the top have been bought out. Or are powerless to stop it.
Yeah.
Or get distracted easily by entertainment gurus who take over the government.
Well, then there's the podcast's favorite former head of the science committee in the House, Representative Louis Gohmert, who, oh man, I remember the fun days when we'd talk about him back in like 2013, 2014. Stupid stuff he'd say.
Oh, the before times.
Yeah. His whole anti-evolution statements. And
at least regarding the podcast, we're starting getting back to that.
But what did he have to say?
Yeah.
Quote, "They rose up through all over Egypt, and as a result of the people rising up in the greatest numbers in history ever, anywhere, they turned the country around. If they can do that there, think of what we can do here."
Yep.
He continued on saying, quote, "This was a cheated election and we can't let it stand."
You know what's funny is in my mind, I keep framing it in the exact opposite way he means. It's like, man, yeah, it's true. We have the power to fight back and get rid of all those Trumpsters. It's like, man, you're right. So many people voted for Trump. That can't be right. We can't let that stand. We got to put these people down.
A sitting member of Congress is calling for an armed rebellion
And not in the name of civil rights,
No.
but in the name of
Conspiracy theories.
And Christian nationalism. Which is exactly what, every atheist is like, this is what we were afraid was going to happen. This is why we kept suing you people.
Uh-huh.
And that's actually exactly kind of what happened.
And we also have Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito.
Oh, I'm so sick of him.
So he gave a speech.
Oh, was this his most recent tirade that actually got him in trouble? Well, trouble relatively. It got him mentioned in the media, which is...
Yeah. It got him to be talked about in Politico and a bunch of other news sites and on podcasts like ours. In his speech, he was smart enough to not put it into really good sound bites. But what he effectively said is gay rights and access to abortion is persecution of Christians.
Yeah.
And the greatest challenge the courts are going to have to face here in the future is protecting free speech, which those shouldn't actually be connected.
Yeah. No, because you're talking about freedom of speech was basically freedom of, what most people incorrectly assume is the freedom of expression of opinions and the right to deny civil liberties to a group of people. So very different things. And the right has done a very good job of making the one look like the other.
Yeah.
When it's not.
Right.
But it's too late. They already think that way.
And they have been...
So we have to be able to we have to convince the right, us, reasonable people, that a protection of civil liberties, whether it's for people that you think are morally bankrupt or not, is actually good for them in the long run. And isn't a freedom against your right to express yourself. It's a freedom for these people to at least exist in the land of the free.
But how do you do that?
It all starts with those little conversations at Thanksgiving. The really painful ones. The ones where you walk out because Uncle is just too drunk and won't shut up.
But not that big of a Thanksgiving this year.
Hopefully not.
Unless you want Uncle to die.
How are we going? There's going to be so many turkey leftovers this year.
Oh, yeah.
Because
there always are.
I wonder if they've sold more turkeys this year than, usual.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because more individual families are doing.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have even... If it wasn't for the fact that the turkey for us this year is free, I wouldn't even do a turkey. But turkey enchiladas are really good.
Turkey's
Sorry.
a useful meat.
I'm getting sidetracked.
No, but the big one of the big problems here is conservatives. There has been a certain portion of conservatives, and this is with this cancerous blob that I referred to earlier.
I referred to it as a cancer.
Okay, the blob that I referred to. Yes.
Can you please do the dun 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 after you say the blob? This is where I need my soundboard. Boom, 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 boom.
It is a part of that blob.
Dun dun dun.
Is white supremacists, and white supremacists have been pissed off that they can't exclude black people from their businesses.
Right. That's been around forever. It's just been covered up.
It went away, was prohibited in the 60s, and they haven't been happy. A lot of them haven't been happy about it.
Well, and I think, and it's funny that because it does correlate with the anti-gay, anti-Muslim, that kind of thing, where you could say I can refuse service to anyone. That used to be racist. It still is. But then they found this whole other group that was another visible group that you could turn away. And so they started using it for that, claiming that racism was over. It wasn't. And now they're saying, well, you can't exclude these people either. And now they're going back to the old-fashioned racism and saying, well, if you can't let me do that, you can't let me do that. You're persecuting me.
Right.
And that's not okay. It's like, that's because you're No, see? Circular logic here.
It's
so frustrating.
It's the erosion of the norms. One of the societal norms that has been very critical is individuals are a category. Businesses are another category. Churches are a separate category, and government is a different category. And they're all separate, and they're all getting eroded into the blob.
Bum, bum, bum. Do you see how excited I got there?
Yeah.
And I saw you were going to say it. Okay.
If corporations are people and corporations can have
Thank
sincerity...
you, Romney.
What?
He was the one that pushed that way back.
Citizens United was before, at least before his presidential run.
Oh, it was before it, but he was a huge...
Oh.
We heard a lot about it here in Idaho because he was a Utah businessman. Yeah, he was definitely a...
He was a Utah businessman who was governor of Massachusetts.
Great health care.
Yeah. Romney cares pretty good. Yeah. But the at the point that corporations are people, and then you add in the Hobby Lobby decision, not only are corporations people with political views, but corporations are people with religious views. And when corporations can have beliefs, then that means that corporations can be persecuted against on those beliefs, which means your business being forced to serve gay people is being persecuted.
Right.
And that is stupid.
We think it's stupid. Yeah. I mean, it's just because that's how it used to be.
It is stupid because of the point that you open your business to the public, you are opening your business to the public.
But only because the law says you have to do that.
Because
if they had their choice, they'd still have black only, white only at the door.
To have a functioning society that, as a country, we decided quite a while ago that we want to have, you need to have it be that when you open your business to the public, you are opening your business to the public.
To all of it. Yeah. Well,
and we need to get back to that. But with 3 Trump appointees and Alito and Thomas,
just gotta keep on trucking.
So we got some good news out of Poland. Okay, there's also some bad in here, but there's also some good. We skipped the story recently about their most recent high court ruling on basically finishing their ban on abortion. But that was pretty recent, and it's been a gradual process where their court's been whittling away at abortion access until now it's virtually impossible to get access to an abortion in Poland. I think medically necessary is the only time it's still allowed. Any elective procedures are not. A new poll asked Poles about their attitudes towards the Catholic Church in Poland. Poland is a traditionally Catholic country where the Catholic Church has a ridiculous amount of power, including pushing things like getting rid of abortion.
Okay.
So the favorability response, nationwide, it was an even split between positive, neutral, and negative.
Okay.
35% have a positive view of the church, 31% have a neutral view, and 32% have a negative view.
Okay. Sounds about right.
Among people between the age of 18 and 29, only 9% had a positive view of the church. 44% were neutral, and 47% had a negative view of the church.
Okay. But that's also an age group that nobody cares about.
That's an age group that nobody cares about now.
There's always hope, guys.
But in another decade or two.
Give it a decade. We have some crappy people in power right now, but
yeah, they will eventually die.
Or this younger group is going to get hit with reality real hard over the head and become just like their parents and their grandparents. Womp womp.
I don't think that's. I don't think that's.
You don't think young idealism gets stifled by.
When it comes to negative views of religion, I don't think it does. If you look at history with countries getting less religious, those are trends that accelerate over generations. There are some studies that are suggesting that atheism will be on the decline in the future, but that is because atheists don't have a lot of babies, and it's mostly white people who are becoming atheists worldwide, and white people aren't having many babies, and Muslims and Catholics have tons of babies.
Yeah, but they're also going to,
some of those kids will become atheists, most won't, is the premise there. But that's looking at the worldwide scale. But as countries lose religion, they have a tendency that tends to continue. You look at Western Europe, and countries don't get more religious. The U.S. is a strange exception with things like the Great Awakening and Second Great Awakening, hopefully, and then the Evangelical Revival, and hopefully.
Are you proving your point or disproving your point here?
The U.S. is weird.
Okay.
Hopefully we will follow the world norms this time. And moving to some COVID news, Pastor John Hagee is the senior pastor of the Cornerstone Church in San Antonio, and a frequent person that Right Wing watches. And he, while being opposed to requiring masks at his church or any social distancing in his church, he caught COVID, was hospitalized for it, and then went back to his church. And here's what he had to say while seated.
I spent 15 days in a hospital with double pneumonia, and I'm still supposed to be home gasping for air. I'm on this platform speaking of the glory of God for the healing power of God. I bring under the authority of Jesus Christ every sickness and every disease, and especially the COVID thing that's sweeping this nation. We have a vaccine. The name is Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God.
So apparently he doesn't have Jesus.
But he does, because he got healed. Unlike the rest of those Christians that died. The 250,000 people, a good percentage of whom are Christians.
Yep.
Good, that would consider themselves to be good Christians, died.
He spent 15 days in the hospital.
With double pneumonia. No.
I don't know.
Notice he didn't say.
I don't know whether or not he was in the ICU, but that means that he was in bad enough shape to require hospitalization and close monitoring to make sure he didn't die.
So if you were to come out of that alive, what's the natural thing you're going to think if you're a religious person?
You're going to thank God.
Yeah. And you're going to think, I beat it, so all I need to do is preach the word and everybody else can beat it too.
But even if you're trying to go with it as the religious message on it, it shouldn't be Jesus is the vaccine. It should have been, trust in the Lord because he saved me. If you get this, if you have faith, he will save you too.
Right. You should have said it was the Jesus is the cure.
Yeah, the cure.
But I mean, we're
not the vaccine.
Nitpick.
Oh no, you absolutely can.
Okay.
He was encouraging his people to not take it seriously when it put him in the hospital for 15 days.
He never admitted to actually having it.
Yeah, he did.
He said double pneumonia. He did not say by COVID.
His son had admitted prior that he was admitted to the hospital with COVID.
His son can say all he wants, but this guy, if we're going to nitpick, this guy probably honestly believes he did not have COVID, or if he did, it was a minor. The only time he mentioned COVID was when he was talking about the stuff spreading across America, like this COVID thing. That doesn't. He had double pneumonia. It's just a different perspective.
Oh man.
Either way, reality's a little with this guy. So.
Yeah, because
his son probably was like, oh, yeah, no, he had COVID. He's like, shut up.
Well, here's what his son had said about it.
Pastor Hagee has been diligent to monitor his health during this entire COVID pandemic. But this past week, he was informed by his personal physician that he did test positive for COVID. It was discovered early. It's being closely monitored. He is receiving extremely good medical treatment. And I can tell you that he feels well enough to be upset with his doctors.
Yeah. What an asshole.
Yeah. So, anybody who thinks that, Jesus will cure you of disease has been falling for the same snake oil crap for everybody else has been doing for 2,000 years. Nothing you can do about that.
E.W. Jackson is a right-wing radio host and former candidate for lieutenant governor of Virginia. And he told his church, he is a pastor. He told his church that they don't have anything to fear with COVID and that Christians don't have to get the virus. It's almost like it's a choice.
That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the coronavirus. I'm not going to get the coronavirus. I'm not going to give anybody the coronavirus because I can't get it because I've talked to God about it and I've taken my vaccine and my vaccine is Psalm 91. I am free from that mess.
Yep, the whole Jesus is the vaccine.
Yep, God, it's so annoying because people actually believe it. They think they can cure away the cancer or pray away the cancer, pray away the disease. It doesn't work. And it would be okay if they kept it to themselves, but then they expose their family and their friends and their kids' schoolmates.
Well, here's his update on all of that.
I've been out for the last several weeks. A couple of weeks I was out because I was speaking somewhere else. And the last week I was out because I was tested positive for COVID-19. So, but I'm back. I'm healthy. I'm sound. I'm whole. Praise God.
Okay, so
Yep.
take his word for it. It's not a vaccine.
Yeah. In Utah, the Utah Valley Hospital in Provo had what they described as a handful of conspiracy theorists trying to break into the intensive care unit.
Oh, this is bullshit. This is criminal.
They had cameras and they wanted to break into the hospital, sneak into the ICU to take pictures and see if this is real, if the ICU is actually full.
And all it would take is one empty bed for them to freak out because somebody had just died and been transported out or something.
Yeah.
But they didn't get that far, right? Because they're crazy.
They didn't get that far because it's not easy to get into a hospital right now, let alone an ICU. Hospitals have limited entry points because every hospital in the country has to screen people to minimize the risk of somebody with COVID coming in other than for care.
Yeah, you know, conspiracy theorists, window bashers are not the healthiest right now.
No. And not going to want to go through that screening. And ICUs are restricted units in most hospitals.
I don't know. You have a really good point about conspiracies and the amount of people involved. And if you have every hospital in the country saying that they're near capacity or at capacity, that's a lot of people who are colluding in a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to break it.
Yeah.
And so far, nobody has. It's like the election fraud stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Heard a lot of people talking about election fraud on the day of the election. Oh, wait, they've all recanted their stories because they can't keep up the lie.
Right.
It's the same. God. And never mind the other people that they could have exposed in the ICU. Of course,
Or
they're
the
usually
exposure they would have gotten in the ICU.
Of course, now there's usually separate COVID units. So they would have burst into the ICU only to find out it was the wrong one and exposed a bunch of poor people to whatever the hell they just dragged in.
So what's funny is these guys would have had to make it to the 5th floor to actually get to the ICU. And yeah, you're not going to sneak into a hospital right now.
There's no sneaking.
Yeah, despite how...
Especially a group of people.
Yeah.
A large group of people, that's going to stick out.
As somebody who works for a hospital, I work from home. I haven't been to my office in like 4 months, I think. And it's a pain in the ass to get into work. If you're going in as not an employee, it's even harder to get in unless you're going to the ER or OB ward.
Well, it's straight up heartbreaking for a lot of people. They can't go in and see family.
Yeah.
Or anything.
Like, they make it...
Dude, the people inside, the hospital workers can't get food delivered to them. I mean, it's just, it's straight up.
Yeah. And even if everything is full and every clinical person is busy at work caring for patients, both the normal load and the COVID load, there's still extra people there to man the entrances.
Yeah.
Because you got security personnel and you've got administrative personnel that are getting pulled from other jobs to take care of that.
Yeah.
So don't think just because they're full and they're out of nurses doesn't mean they can't stop you from breaking in or sneaking into the ICU.
Yeah, you don't need a medical degree to bust somebody's ass.
Nope.
Oh, sorry, ASS, if we're trying to bait all ages. Don't want to get flagged.
Man.
Or have you referred to that yet?
Oh, I did. Yeah. And for some good news, we now have 2 vaccines that in preliminary analysis are 95% effective at protecting against coronavirus. Pfizer has revised their number from 80% to about 94%, and Moderna's number is just shy of 95%.
Sounds great. I'm not going to go into all the numbers that I discussed with you earlier.
Right.
Because there are ways that you can tear this study apart if you don't know the raw numbers.
It's preliminary data.
Yeah.
This is preliminary. They finally got to enough that they could report on something.
So that's better than nothing.
And I'm glad they did because we need hope right now.
Yeah. something besides a Facebook ad asking you to take part in a COVID trial for $750. That's worth your life.
Yeah. Neither one has had serious complications, so that's good. And 95% effective. They're in both cases, they're calculating that the same way. They're looking at out of the people enrolled in the trial who have become positive with COVID since enrolling in the trial, how many of them had gotten the vaccine versus how many hadn't. And about 95% of the people who got the vaccine, approximately 95% of the people who were in the trial who got COVID were given the placebo.
Right. So that's a little different than just the average person being told it was 95% effective, meaning that only, 5 people out of 100 got COVID. That's not quite how that works. But it's still very promising.
Yeah.
And in terms of vaccines, I just want to know how long these things are going to last. I mean, are we still looking at 4 months?
It's still too soon to tell. We won't know that for years. It's going to take a while.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it for news. Lauren, thank you for joining me for the news.
Yes. I managed to pull through. I'm exhausted.
And we have feedback regarding episode 379 via the Podbean app. We got the comment, truckers listen. I don't remember what Lauren and I said that prompted that, but I'm glad to hear that there are truckers listening. And if you want to contact us, you can use the SpeakPipe button on the website, use the contact form also on the website, or shoot us an email, contact@atheistnomads.com. We don't have any new patrons, but if you'd like to support the show, you can find out how at atheistnomads.com/donate, or just go to patreon.com/atheistnomads. That wraps it up for this week. So until next time, remember, not all those who wander are lost.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Atheist Nomads. You can find show notes and contact information at atheistnomads.com. Follow us on Twitter at Atheist Nomads, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/atheistnomads. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcatcher of choice, and while you're there, feel free to leave us a review. Theme music is courtesy of Sturdy Fred. Until next time, this has been the Atheist Nomads.